Junior Volleyball Association presents Sideline Strategy, a volleyball podcast. Today's episode features Peter Christofferson, the head of athletic performance for volleyball at T3 Performance in Northeast Ohio. He is a performance training coach for Cleveland Volleyball Club, a JVA member club in Cleveland, Ohio. Peter oversees the strength and conditioning for all volleyball athletes, as well as training various athletes in other sports, including speed jumping, strength conditioning development, and return to play. Peter, hi. Thanks for joining me today.
Hey, how we doing? It's a pleasure to be here, talk with you a little bit.
Absolutely. And this is such an important topic. But first, can you share a little bit more about your background? I mean, you've been working with athletes of all sports and volleyball specifically a lot lately. Can you share a little bit more about that background and your training and your role at T3?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, myself, I kind of got into the weight room and like helping athletes because myself, I wasn't the best athlete. So I kind of wanted to look for any kind of outlet I could to get better at sport. And, you look into how to get better as an athlete, the weight room is the one that starts to pop up more and more. So I started looking into ways to like train myself, try and get better for sports. And that kind of led me to working with, people in general, not even just like athletes. I actually started a little bit in the CrossFit space. I started competing in that a little bit. And then that eventually led me to Olympic lifting, which was my college sport, clean and jerk and snatch, if anyone's familiar. Some people might have done power cleans before, but it's a sport that not too many people are interested in. But that's what I did through college. Yeah, and then I got into CrossFit space training, but then eventually I started interning for multiple high schools and colleges and really just starting to work one-on-one with athletes and working with team settings and just all kinds of application there. I got my bachelor's of exercise science from Cleveland State University back during the COVID times, trapped in my basement doing all that. So I wasn't as active as I could have been, which is interesting. But I interned for Division II Lake Erie College, Division I Robert Morris University. And then after all this time, I'm here at T3 Performance. I have a couple different things I do here, but volleyball is something that I work primarily with. I love the sport and I love to help these athletes be the best they can. So it's where I'm at right now.
Cool. Can you share what your schedule looks like in terms of like how often are you training those volleyball athletes each week and for how long do they usually come in and work out with you?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. A lot of my athletes do my private training group called the 10-Foot Club. We're a private strength and conditioning group that goes 6 days a week. They can come as many times as they want, and I form a schedule and workout program based on how many times they want to come up. It might differ a little bit on the time of year. Sometimes club could be a little bit busier. Maybe I see them on the lower end, but like right now in summer, I'm hoping the girls can see me a large amount throughout their week when the intensity and the amount of volleyball they're playing is not so high, so I can actually get them and work on the development in the weight room. So with that, they can get a full access to training program. It's a little bit of everything, speed and agility training, making sure they move well. We work jumping and plyometrics because, volleyball, jumping, they go hand in hand. Everyone hears about it. And then the back half's our weight training portion, make sure we're building their body up to be healthy, safe, and then make sure they can perform well on the court. And then there's also, I do a lot of one-on-one training as well with volleyball athletes, track and field, all the other ones I do. So there's plenty of different options we work to, but I kind of just make my schedule based on when the kids want to come in and yell at to lift more weights. So it's a fun time and I love to make it.
And so talk through a little bit about, volleyball's got kind of the preseason, during season, postseason. So if we're taking an athlete that's just, getting into the start of her season, whether it be high school or club, what kind of impact do you feel like athletic performance training has on a volleyball athlete that time of the year?
Yeah, I mean, it can really just turn into a foundational base of health for them. I found, everyone kind of like links the weight room in their head with performance. You think of you've seen the social media videos, the kids look all the time, and like people lifting big weights, doing crazy stuff in the gym. But I don't think anyone really realizes what it can do just to make sure that you're staying within your sport and doing it all the time. You don't really think about being hurt until you're actually hurt. I think it's a good move to kind of always keep in the back of your head that it is a possibility. You take measures for it. So when we're in the weight room, we're able to develop the quality of all those things that get, possibly injured when you play an intense sport like volleyball. There's muscles, tendons, ligaments, and really just the overall burnout that can happen throughout the sport with their nervous system. And, with, how hard they work cardiovascularly too. It's a big cardio sport. Got to make sure the lungs are going to be able to handle that and push throughout the endurance of it. So giving them just that healthy base and a little bit extra work within there can really take them throughout the season and make sure they're healthy with it. But then there is the performance aspect too. When you're able to use the weight room appropriately, you're going to jump higher, you're going to move faster, you're going to have a faster arm swing to help a little bit, and you're just going to be able to develop things as we go, and you're going to be able to push the envelope a little bit.
Yeah, good stuff. So what's your experience been like working with volleyball athletes in terms of like preparing them for high school season and then transitioning to club season and then going back to high school season? Like, have you seen some cyclical things, some, consistencies when working with those athletes? Do you have like a kind of a regimen or plan that you do, taking into account like how long the club season is, but also how many matches players are playing in the short high school season?
Yeah, yeah. So it really, there's a lot of variables when it comes into being an athlete. Like, my freshman girl who has played volleyball maybe a couple years is going to have a much different training program than my senior who's looking to push for a college scholarship. So we have to take into account training age of what they've done. If someone is brand new to the weight room as well, I'm not going to necessarily have them do a lot of my complex exercises that I know push the envelope, but they're just not ready for. And then, like you said, like with a long club season, it depends. Like, when is the time to really push and pull back for when we're going to reach for performance, but also just doing like necessarily some bare minimums for some things to maintain their health and performance as they go. So it's really looking at the time of the year first. Like, going into things like usually our November and December, we're like speaking for CVC when I get to work with them. November, December is a lot of our intro and a lot of our like kind of health phases to where we're doing a lot more of like, teaching a lot more reps, a lot more volume, not necessarily pushing quite yet, just making sure when they're coming off, because, with a lot of our high level players, that time, they're probably coming off playoffs. They're probably coming off, trying to push for high level, placing in the state tournament. So their bodies are going to be beat up already, but their coaches, are not going to necessarily be happy with them if they're going to take a whole month off. So they're going to jump the envelope real quick. So I think what we can do in the weight room is to do kind of some things that can mitigate those problems and those stressors. Like, I know volleyball is going to be very fast. There's going to be a lot of jumps, a lot of landings. Let's do the right things to make sure everything is taken care of in the body in a slower sense to keep the structure intact, but also make sure they feel healthy and we can keep rising as the performance goes up. And we need that as well. So, and then, looking at it from a standpoint of, do I have my older girls training or my younger ones, depending on their training age and just age in general? It might just all be teaching for my younger athletes. Like, we have some of the young athletes like as low as 11 in our weight room, and for them it becomes more of like, a fun time to learn that, especially with, on the girls side of things, it can be hard to get them in the weight room, make them understand that this is, a place for you. It can be a pretty male dominated thing, but if you teach them to have fun, you teach them that these things will help them, and it's not all just, this crazy intense thing. You can teach them that the weight room is going to be something that's a long time part of their lifestyle. So it's all about meeting the athletes where they're at and then just giving them everything you can to make sure that you don't necessarily push too hard to, burn them at the stake a little bit, but you can also just make sure they have room to grow as well.
Yeah, and you said it's so much more than just lifting hard weights. I mean, how do you land? How do
Yes.
you actually even just utilize? I see so many athletes jumping off the front part of their feet, right? And not heel toe, and that really affects everything else. There's just so much you can balance, right? Core strength and just understanding all of that. I think at a young age is really valuable. If you can train them early, then they build a really good foundation and you can avoid some of those injuries, which is, kind of leading to my next question for you. Do you feel like you've been able to, whether an athlete is maybe coming off an injury or, maybe they're coming off ACL or something like that, but then there's the athletes that you're trying to help them avoid injuries and stay healthy during the long club season. So do you feel like you're with working with CVC, that's been an important role of yours and your team is, it's a long season. Let's really think about what we're doing when so that we can prevent some of these injuries later on.
Yeah, absolutely. That was kind of a big thing that we make a good priority with the coaches, is to speak with us when these problems are arriving. Like, if a certain team might have a lot of like a similar common injuries, or maybe there's like some like maybe there's just like feeling a little bit tired overall. It can be kind of my job to kind of change what we're doing in the weight room and doing in those sessions, or it could be my job to also kind of look at what a practice schedule looks like for a coach, and I'd be like, hey, like, maybe you just have to pull back a little bit kind of on the intensity of some things, because there are some coaches who push their athletes very hard, which is very needed. But, there's also a time where we have to make sure that everything is in a balance to where we're not overdoing them too early. You push your athletes so hard in the front third of the season, you might have really good results. But then it leads to the last two thirds of it just being a little bit wishy washy because they're a little bit beat up with that. But as far as like injuries go, we're really good at working around things too. It's not even just about like completely avoiding injury, because there's just times where that's not going to happen. We play a very explosive game, so we have to get there. One of our athletes this year, she unfortunately had a partial torn ligament in her thumb that took her out for a couple weeks, but we were able to mitigate it with some training. Instead of, like, using our typical dumbbells and everything, we have band work that we do a lot. I still was able to work with her twice a week, and luckily, like, as soon as she got her cast off, she was able to compete the next week and get herself ready for nationals this year. So we were able to do a really good job with that. And I had another athlete that during her high school season, she played a whole game. I actually went to see the game, and she was very good. But I get a text the next day that she's going to be out a couple days because she hurt her ankle. But I didn't really understand because I didn't see her limping or anything. And then she showed me the warm up tape. She ended up, like, kind of just working a jump serve. She landed on a ball, and it was like
Oh,
the bottom of her foot ended up touching the side of her shin pretty much. But, like, she played a whole game, and that kind of goes to show kind of what resiliency can do. It's not necessarily just you're going to be able to avoid these positions forever, but you're going to have the durability to go through these things. And the amount of ankle work I think we did, and, like, I'll never one-to-one claim that I'm someone that gets athletes their success. It's all them. It's everything, the work they put in. They deserve all the glory. But I really do think when you lay out a good plan and make sure they're doing all the right things, you can really save them some time from being off the court. And I think that's just how it is. And how fast and violent truly volleyball is, as you learn, it can really just, go bad pretty quickly with some things. So the more durable we can get them and the more, confident we can have in their health, I think the better it is in the long run.
yeah. Yeah. And you really touched on an important thing when you said, having a conversation with the coach. I mean, this is about relationships. The most important thing is the athlete, and you're both looking out for the athletes, right? So having that open dialogue with them, I think that's really valuable. And as a coach, you would hope that coaches would take that feedback, right? And know that you're looking out for them, and hey, maybe you got to watch the number of swings that Anna takes at the next practice, or her knees kind of sore, whatever. The things that you're hearing and having conversations with the athletes about should be talked about with their coach, right?
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why I give a lot of credit to the coaches at CBC and Jen Lyric, who's our director. Really,
Mhm.
just whenever we sit down in our off season to kind of develop a plan, it's not necessarily like here's what I want, here's what I want. It's asking kind of the opposite. What do you guys want to do? Like, where do you see the success? Yeah, like, she and all our coaches asked me right away, like, what do you think the best optimal program for you guys looks like? And then they kind of adjusted and did everything they could to accommodate for our needs. But it was the same thing from us. We asked them, like, what is your practice schedule going to look like? Where do you think the weight room is going to fill holes for you? And where do you think that we can help you? And it's just, that's why we were able to make a really good system. I think we kept a lot of athletes healthy this year. And same thing with my girls that I work with one-on-one as well. It's like, tell me what your days are like. Tell me what your schedule is. Let me know on everything you're doing, and I can work off that, and we can make sure that we're pushing you in the right direction.
Yeah, so I played club ball with Jen. We were teammates for a couple years, and she was an incredible teammate, really fun to play with. And I know that she puts a high emphasis on player, health and wellness and injury prevention. I mean, she endured an ACL injury, I think maybe two, during
Yeah.
during club and college. So she had to battle through that, and I know that how important she thinks that, well, what you're doing is. So yeah, definitely, you're working with a really awesome club director, and I know her kids are fortunate to be playing for her as well. So let's get into a little bit more about kind of the high school season and what, a lot of these high school programs are mandating workouts for their athletes while the season is still going on for junior volleyball. So that causes a little bit of a conflict for the athlete because they want to be a leader. They want to make the team next year. They want to have a good, relationship and respect from the high school coach. There doesn't seem to be any time for them to truly rest their bodies. So, how do you guide the athletes when they're making that transition from club to high school? And I guess maybe it comes back to working with some of the coaches, but what if you're not talking to those coaches? Like, how do you work directly with the athletes to help them through those times?
Yeah, I've always found that the athletes that are going to be a little bit, like, more prepared, like on my side of things, can handle those, like, really well. Like, it can be very hard to kind of get in, like, especially like for a volleyball player who's doing so much, to jump into a training program like ours. And like I said, I'll never make a one-to-one claim, it'll avoid anything, but like the more you're able to do and the more you're able to work a little bit and like build up these capacities that we work on, the more you're able to handle strength wise, the better cardiovascular you are, the more you're able to, just be an explosive athlete, the more efficient you're going to be able to do your job at. Like people kind of forget that like when you're not very good at something, you try a lot harder, and that can kind of end up to be the point to where you get hurt. So if you're able to build your physical tools up, then your skills get better a little bit as well. So
Mhm.
when we can find that balance and making sure that the physical goes to all of our skills in volleyball, etc., we're going to make sure we're pushing the envelope in the right direction there. So I always tell them, like, I don't necessarily need you to be a weight room warrior 3 to 4 days a week, but let's start at the minimum and let's work our way up to make sure that we're
Mhm.
getting the right benefits for everything, just to make sure that you're staying healthy with your performance as well. When it's talking to coaches a little bit, I think it's becoming more and more how should I say, maybe more and more understood that these girls are working all the time. I'm fortunate enough to work at Bay High School, and our head coach, she was a coach for JO for a long time, and she just has a lot of conversations with me about a lot of these players. Just understanding that, not only is that they need that break, is that when they're working with high level volleyball, I think it transfers pretty well. Like you might be running a different system than their club team. You might be having girls that play one position for club, but then another one for school. But volleyball can transfer very well. So I don't necessarily believe that you need to jump into all these intense practices right away. Maybe some do depending on the team. Like I'm not a coach myself, but just knowing like what volleyball is like and kind of making that transition. I think you just got to meet your players where you're at and say, hey, like volleyball is volleyball. And even if we're going to make some switches, like, we hope that these gaps transfer. We hope that their JL coaches are doing a great job of being able to be flexible with where they go. So I guess my advice to any of these athletes would be to like understand your body, understand that if you need rest, and there's a lot of signs like, when your appetite is fluctuating, like, you're super incredibly hungry or just not at all. When your sleep quality is going down, you're really anxious. That can be a great sign to where you might be overdoing it a little bit. You should have energy. Like sports are fun. You should want to go play volleyball. It shouldn't just be dragging you back in your life. This is your game that you like. Like if you are wanting to go, then I think you're in a good spot, but you got to kind of mitigate that a little bit. So understand how you're feeling, take your preparation into account, make sure you're covering all those bases, make sure you're getting the full nutrition, the water, the sleep that you need. If you're someone who is getting in the weight room frequently, make sure you're communicating with that coach on what you think you need and listening to them and their considerations on what they think as well. And then just also making sure your head coach knows that you have been putting in the time, you are working hard, but it's also just a two-way street of like knowing that you need to recover as well, because you can only benefit from the work that you're recovering from. So finding that balance is very important.
Yeah, and we've talked about the high school coaches, but what about the club coaches who are adding these Sunday, workouts because we have summer tryouts, right? A lot, I think over 50, 60% of clubs now are doing summer tryouts, are dependent on which region they're in. But that means that teams are set, going to school ball, hey, let's start getting together as a team on Sundays, doing a couple hours on Sundays. Well, that's a day off for the high school kids, right?
Right.
They have two matches weekdays and then they'll play a tournament on a Saturday. I mean, they're playing a lot of volleyball during this short high school season. So those club coaches that are adding in Sundays when club hasn't even started, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think when you're a club coach, like when you're getting towards that end, I imagine like most, like all those coaches that are like still coaching throughout like, June and July, congratulations, you probably qualified for nationals, which is pretty good. So that's a good point to be at. But I think at that point, you can make the assumption that like, with all the training that you've done throughout the club season, like with the squad you have and everything, you might not necessarily have to have these long of practices because like you've installed so much throughout the year. They've done so much throughout the year. You might not have to have a 3 hour plus practice anymore because, you're just kind of working what you want to do. Installing new things, of course, is important, but it's at the point where, your voice can become kind of a little bit redundant to them. So keep it short and powerful, even with like what you do in the practice. And I think that goes a long way. So if you can find a way to maximize your time, and I think that's just a good lesson for anything, is like maximize everything you can do with the time you have. And if you keep it short and sweet, they're going to be able to get good work, but not be burnt out a little bit because, they will be wanting to go to some school open gyms, not even just for the factor of showing up for coach and trying to get better. They want to see their friends. They want to go because these open up in gyms that they do are a fun time for them. Like I said, hopefully they're still feeling volleyball is fun at that point. It's such a big one. So if you're a club coach going into it, just know what their bodies are probably feeling. You've been to X amount of tournaments for since the past like 4 or 5 months. They're feeling fresh and ready and motivated to do these future tournaments, but there is a point to where the body can only do so much in so little of time. And there are outside factors out of your control in their life through school volleyball and just everything else. Being a teenager is hard in the world. Make sure you maximize your time. See what you can do with the littlest amount of time, like not necessarily a half-hour practice, but see what can possibly come out of shorter and more intense bursts so they can recover from it better. And I think this their health does better in the long run. And you'll get better effort from them. If they know things are shorter, then they know they're gonna have to get more out of the time they have. So you'll get harder work out of that in general. That's been my look on things anyway. I've always found a little bit better. If we keep it shorter and sweet and they know that, then I don't want to say it sets a timer for them, but like, hey, like we gotta go. We have little time and I want to get things done.
Yeah, yeah. All those coaches are running 4-hour practices. Listen up.
Yeah.
So this is just for the coaches listening, maybe having that routine before practice or maybe at the end of practice. Can you give them some recommendations for the best ways to get the body ready for practice, whether it's like 5 minutes of dynamic? Should they stretch at the end? I mean, what do you recommend for the first 5-10 minutes of practice? Or maybe it's before the girls get on the court because you got another team maybe using the court. Get on the court, be ready to go. Give them some tips for their team. And then also at the end of practice, how to, finish. And so you're not just walking out the door, grabbing your stuff and going.
Yeah, well, the typical things that everyone knows, your dynamic warm up, your stretching is always good. I like to kind of rev up their nervous system as much as I can. So anytime you can get like a little bit of jumping, it could be as simple as like, some vertical jumps in place, some little pogo leaps where they're just trying to be stiff on their ankles and bounce up and down a little good, some broad jumps, some sprints, just of that nature. But I think the best way, like if you really want to get like, their brains work and have them compete a little bit, I like to, we always did like races, like, a little cat and mouse game where like one person starts in front, they have to chase them for sprints. It could even be as simple as like, things like sharks and minnows in games like that. Like, make it fun. If they're going into the practice with the motions that they know are going to be the same, adding little things like that can really just change it up to where like it sparks the brain up. They've probably been sitting at school all day. It's the summer, so going into, so not then, but they're probably just going in, they know like with the same routine over and over again. Change it up a little bit. When you have diversity into it, it kind of just adds to the spice of it all and just makes it a little more fun. So I'd say as long as you can get their nervous system ready to go, and when your athletes a little bit too, individual things are very important. Like we have a lot of girls that have certain issues with shoulder work that might necessarily they need, so they'll know to come a little bit early, maybe get one of our like resistance bands, or we actually have like machines they can use in the other room to get some shoulder work there before their practice for that good. If they have knee pain, we have a lot of isometrics or just like wall sits, iso lunge holds that can really help jumpers knee a lot. And the girls who have ankle work, just knowing your individuals and letting them do their individual thing is important. But then when you get them all together, fire them up a little bit and let them have a little fun, and it'll go a long way to get them prepped.
Cool. And then practice ends. What do you think they should do to cool off?
I think it's the best time for mobility. Like any time where you can just kind of get that nice stretch circle and, not, if a lot of them can kind of do the whole thing where they're just kind of going through like the 1, 2, like
Yeah.
give some good intentional stretching to it, like, and get them really into it and teach them the benefits of that. That's always been my favorite. Or, just like, if you have any room for like, cool down little jogs, or like we have a lot of like assault bikes and like things like that to where they can just do like a small steady state thing where it's like 6 minutes where they pedal and get like a cool down versus just like getting out of there. So I think those things really help just to lengthen the body out after you were just tightening it up for a practice, and then getting the heart rate instead of going from 100 down to 0, slowly nudging it so that you don't just like jump right to it.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Pete. You guys need to check out T3 Performance. You guys are doing amazing work, and you've shared a lot of education with the JVA and our followers. We really appreciate that. Thanks for hopping on with me today to talk through this topic. I mean, we got a lot of coaches that are coaching high school ball as well. So they're going into a new season, ending their club season. I think this gives them a lot of food for thought. And you spoke a lot to the athletes and how important it is for them to be aware and communicate and, just continue to to find the ways to improve in their athletic performance training, right? Because it can have so many benefits on their game. So yeah, thank you so much. You got anything to sign off today? Give a shout out to your website or anything like that?
Yeah, my Instagram is at concretepete18. I made that in high school. Don't make fun of me. But either way, if anyone is out there that really just kind of wants to deep dive a little more information, whether you're a strength and conditioning coach, a trainer that works with volleyball athletes, or you're someone from a volleyball club or high school that kind of wants help with this topic, at my Instagram, and you can kind of find my email and everything through T3 Performance's website. I'm always available for a reach out, like no cost or nothing. Just hit me up and we can have a great conversation. I want everybody to make sure that they feel like they can do this safely. And if any kind of information I can share with great people, I'm more than willing to do that. So feel free to reach out anytime to anyone who's listening to this.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Peter. Take care. We'll be in touch. Have a good day.
Thanks. You too. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye.